Assalamualaikum and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight as we prepare for the much anticipated tabling of the 2019 budget tomorrow. And I am Tasim Lokman.
And I am Lidiana Rosli.
And we will be talking to two professors today, Lidiana.
Right. As you know, this would be the first budget to be tabled under the new Pakatan Harapan government as led by Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Finance Minister Lim Guan Eng will be tabling the budget, the highly anticipated budget, at 3 p.m. tomorrow. But before that, we have two experts with us in the studio to walk us through on what we can anticipate in the tabling tomorrow.
That's right. With us is Mr. Dinesh Khanna, Tax Advisor and Partner at Tratax, as well as UniKL Associate Professor Economy, Dr. Aimi Zulhazmi Abdul Rashid. Thank you so much for taking your time of your busy schedule to join us tonight on the eve of the budget presentation. And without waiting and wasting our time further, let's just get down to business. Let's start with the first question, which is, okay, we know this is the first ever budget under the new government. And the finance minister himself has admitted that this is going to be a very difficult one. So let's start by setting the context here. How has the global and local scenario changed compared to a year ago?
Okay.
Doctor.
Firstly, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, coming to the question, certainly there are significant changes over the year, over the period. Globally, of course, now the oil price has been rising steadily. It was 57 US per barrel a year ago. Now it's hovering about 70 plus. So that's one indication. Number two, of course, we read a lot about trade wars between China and US, which is basically affecting the global economy and the outlook for the next 2 years. Then the other one is worrying is the strengthening of US dollars, as well as because of the increase in the interest rates by the Federal Reserve. So these are the things that globally happening. And domestically, of course, the change of government. So that's a lot of things. A year ago we have GST. Now we have SST. So, and the ongoing debate about the inflation, if the prices of goods going down or not with GST and with SST, so on and so forth. And then, of course, all the events, the 1MDB, FGV, you know, 1 trillion debt and so on. So, and of course, change of leadership, not only the government, but as well as the agencies, government machinery, as well as the JLCs. So, a lot of things have changed. I'll bite about the currency, ringgit versus US dollars. Actually, it's about the same. Versus a year ago, it was 420, 25, 20. Now it's about 420. That's the only things about the same. So whatever we are facing now is the same ringgit exchange to US dollar what we had in 2017.
It's just all these variables that have...
It's all the variables that you have to take into considerations.
Okay, but going by what you say, Professor, you know, a number of several research reports are coming in and have seen that we are in for a somewhat rough 2019 from, you know, what you just said just now. The expectations are that we will see lower expenditures, a higher fiscal deficit and slower GDP growth. What are your thoughts on this? Are we really in for a rough 2019?
Yeah. By looking at the global scenario and Malaysia being an open economy, obviously we are very much related with all the ongoing events. As I mentioned earlier, the trade wars, the Federal Reserve raising the interest rates, and oil price and so on. On the other hand, domestically, the government is also focusing on the rectifying the economic structure this year. Next year, and reducing the debt, and at the same time we're gonna expect an austerity drive budget coming in. So in fact, in the recently revised 11 Malaysian plan, the government has indicated that there is expenditure is going to be reduced from 260 billion to 220 billion.
So these are belt tightening measures. So this is going to set the tone for what we can expect tomorrow, Well, sorry to bring it to such a bleak part. Okay, Dinesh. Okay, the government is, oh wait, we're continuing with the bleakness. The government is also losing some 43 billion ringgit in revenue on the back of the abolishment of the GST.
Yeah.
Of course, the SST now has been reintroduced, to patch up, to cover this hole somehow. How do you assess this transition from GST to SST? Has it stabilized, or can we expect more adjustments in the future to this, well, somewhat new tax regime?
Okay, I think the bigger picture is we have lost about half of the revenue there.
Yes.
GST used to yield about 43.8 billion or 44 billion. SST brings in about half of that to the table. Plus, this year we had a 3-month tax holiday period where neither one of these applied. So that's really a revenue loss to the government, and only half of it comes back from SST. But when the question was posed, the word used was reintroduce SST.
Right.
Now, SST, as what customs call it, is SST 2.0.
Right.
If you watch a 2.0 of a movie, is it the same as the 1.0? It is not.
No.
So it's the grammar of reintroduction is commonly used, but yes and no. So the fundamental basis of SST has not changed from 1.0 to 2.0, but many of the details are different from 1.0. And this is important, right? Because we had only 3 months after the election to roll out SST 2.0.
Yes.
So when you roll out a system in 2 months, of course, you must have reasonable expectations to it.
Right.
There are a lot of, I personally expect more tightening to be done in this, loose ends to be tightened in the coming budget from a technical perspective, and also perhaps from certain policy perspective.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, when you say loose ends, can you expand further?
Yeah,
on
what
that?
are these loose ends?
Okay, that gets a bit technical there, right? Okay, but service tax, for example, works on a positive list. Unlike GST. GST is, everything is subject to GST unless you are specifically exempted.
Right.
Service tax, on the other hand, is only if you are listed in there, you are subject to service tax. So there's about 8 categories which are covered. And there's a lot of interpretation issues, whether you're in or you're not in, and so on and so forth. I mean, if you take examples of car park, do you remember paying GST on car parks?
Yes.
You do.
Yeah.
Do you pay service tax on car parks?
Yes.
You do.
Yeah.
So that's very clear.
Right.
That's very clear. Similarly, you have areas like sending children for private tuitions.
All right.
Do you remember paying GST on that? You do. Yeah,
I don't know.
private
We don't have
tuitions.
children.
Okay, wrong question. Universities were exempt.
Okay.
Universities were exempt, but
Right.
private tuitions were not exempt in GST era.
Okay.
Okay.
But in the service tax era, it's exempt. Similarly, if you talk about going for movies,
Okay.
in the GST era, movie tickets were subject to GST. Now
Right.
they are subject to only entertainment duty, which has been there all the while. There's no service tax on it.
Right.
So this is a clear-cut area that reconciles between the 44 billion and the 20 over billion.
Okay.
But there are also certain very powerful words in the service tax legislation, like management services,
Right.
which is really open to interpretation,
Yes.
where the same word was used in SST 1.0, director fee were not subject to service tax, but now things are interpreted from a GST mindset. So
Oh, okay, that's
so
interesting.
those are the technical bits of it. Some of it I look forward to be addressed in the coming budget.
Right. Okay.
And if it is not actually addressed in the near future?
There's always a next budget, right?
Okay.
And of course, budget is not the only avenue. Professional bodies also have continuous dialogue with customs and the government bodies when it's something of nitty-gritty to get it ironed out.
Okay.
So as we introduced it in 3 months' time, I think these little things are to be expected.
Right.
And,
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit more of ironing, we have to iron out the kinks. Okay.
So to answer your question, have we stabilized? I don't think you can expect to introduce a tax in 3 months and then stabilize it in the next 2 months. It
Exactly.
doesn't
Yes.
quite work like that. It
And
does take time to stabilize.
And when you say time, how long of a time
Yeah,
are we
what's the
looking
time
at?
period?
12 months after rollout?
It's really not for me to say, but my personal observation would be you need at least 12 months to
Okay,
get
so a
things really
year.
firmed up, to enforce, and when the enforcement bodies go on the ground enforcing, then they may see things differently. So it takes easily 12 months for things to
A lot of
stabilize.
engagement? Is that what you're saying? Is there a lot of engagements when you're trying to put something
Yeah, engagement is one thing, enforcement.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Engagement and enforcement. So this does take 12 months at least, I would say. Any tax for that matter.
Right.
Okay, since we're talking about tax, people are expecting to see some form of taxes on digital economy and a digital tax, particularly on foreign providers. If we were to impose this, we'd be the second country in Southeast Asia after Singapore to do such thing. So I was wondering, what are the main issues and challenges with the proposal itself? Maybe, okay, Dinesh, maybe you could start and then we could follow through with Prof.
Okay, perfect. I think the thing with tax is always say, don't tax me, don't tax you, tax the man behind the tree.
Right.
Okay.
Now the man behind the tree seems to be the digital service providers, right?
Okay.
Because I think the Rakyat may not be prepared to face a new tax yet.
Okay.
The businesses may not. But taxing the digital economy is something that I think is a good way forward.
Okay.
We said it's the second country in Southeast Asia, but I think we shouldn't look at Southeast Asia in isolation. I think globally we are not the first or second or third country. Many countries have done it. Countries like UK, for example, have done it a while ago,
Right.
and they introduced a second layer, third layer of tax as late as this week Monday.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is an ongoing process. Australia did something about it last year, July, and they add on something to it this year, July. So a lot of the countries have begun to realize that, look, a lot of businesses that you had to be physically in the country to do it in the past, now you could do it without being physically in the country.
Right.
A lot of the social media providers, a lot of the apps and platforms that you use to book hotel, or let it be, or a taxi or a cab, a lot of things you could offer the platform regardless of whether you are in Malaysia or outside Malaysia.
Right.
And then you start to realize that by taxing these businesses, you're not taxing foreign investors per se. They are foreign service providers who are not investors in Malaysia. That's why we call them as foreign digital service providers.
Yes.
And globally, there is a trend to move towards this tax. Otherwise, you're losing tax on the conventional model. And if you don't supplement it with a digital tax, with the rise of digital economy,
Right.
that's going to be a revenue loss in the long term for any government, any
Right.
government for that matter. And digital tax is a very broad word. How exactly do you do it? There's two forms how you could do it. If you look at UK as an example, they go by direct tax, which means they tax the income of the foreign service provider.
Okay.
If you look at Australia as an example, they tax the consumption in Malaysia. Now, my take is like this. Whichever way we take, whether we take an indirect tax route or direct tax route, I think the Malaysian businesses will be very happy because you're putting the foreign business in the same footing as a Malaysian business.
Yes.
So I don't see any hiccups from the Malaysian business. Of course, much depends on the implementation details and so on. But onset, I think it puts them on equal footing. How about the people themselves, right? If we choose to implement digital tax in the route of direct tax, people would not see any different.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
But if you choose to do it in the form of indirect tax, then the people will feel that they are paying the tax,
Okay.
which is not extra, but should be more or less the same amount of tax that they pay if they buy something or a service from a traditional brick and mortar business. So it's good for Malaysian businesses, either way, whether direct or indirect tax. But for consumers, direct tax is indifferent. Indirect tax will end up paying a little bit more. But that's the global trend that we are heading to. So the government really needs to choose between direct or indirect.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the choice they have to
That's
make.
one may be more popular than the other.
Okay.
A common question that get asked in this context is how on earth do you implement it since you're not in Malaysia at the first place, right?
Okay.
This is, as I said, we are not the first country to do it. There are ways of enforcing it. Going through the Multimedia Communication Ministry to block a website that doesn't comply. These are not unprecedented.
Okay.
That there are ways how you do it.
Okay.
And when you talk about digital tax, usually the idea is you have a high threshold, so only the real big boys are caught.
Right.
Like those providers that if you mention the name, any man on the street knows, those providers. And one good thing about tax is also, right, tax brings about awareness to people. So one incidental thing about taxing this digital economy is also, this will make it to the headline of people, and then people will be thinking, oh, we are taxing the digital service provider. So for you to tax them, they need to be making money. I thought they're giving me a free platform. How are they making money then? So this will give rise to issues like people will start to question what's happening with their data, and people will understand the business model of the digital service providers even better.
Okay.
Tax is not all about making money, it's also about neutrality and awareness among
Right.
people.
Okay. And what about your take?
Yeah,
on this?
Prof.
Okay. Looking at the
Okay.
I would like to see that the e-commerce industry in Malaysia particularly to grow exponentially for the next few years. And I think, well, we're thinking about digital tax, and I hope it will not be imposed not until a few more years, until we are certain where we are going and then the growth in Malaysia. This is because we need to encourage the local business, especially
Right.
local business in Malaysia, to adopt digital economy in a big way, especially currently in Malaysia. There's a low implementation of internet in the business.
Okay.
So, I have one report from the World Bank quoted 62% of businesses are connected to the internet in Malaysia. 46% has fixed broadband, often at low quality, and 18% have a web presence of some kind.
Right.
Report as of September 2018. So that shows a very low adoption of business with the IoTs, okay, or Internet of Things. Furthermore, I think the digital infrastructure in Malaysia needs also to be cheaper.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, and it has to be faster. And at current rate, it's not happening. But we know that the government agencies currently encouraging all the telcos, the broadband providers to reduce, to have more efficient and cheaper. Until this happening, then we'll talk about about the digital tax
So
and
it
so on.
works hand in hand. You need to prepare the infrastructure first, and
Exactly.
then you can move forward
Exactly.
with the whole project.
Right.
Exactly.
The whole movement.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I totally concur with Prof on that point.
Okay.
We should look into incentives and exemptions for
Yes.
local businesses to embark on e-commerce. But at the same time, we should also look into taxing the foreign providers
Yeah.
who sit outside Malaysia and provide services or what we call as derived income from the Malaysian market.
Yes.
So we also need to tax them because the provider who is providing e-commerce from Malaysia is already being taxed under the
Right.
ordinary tax rules.
Yes.
And then the provider who is sitting outside and doing the
It's
same
not.
thing is not being taxed,
Yes.
and especially if it's based in Hong Kong, that comes with a lot of exemptions and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, Hong Kong just as an example of a jurisdiction of that
Yes.
matter. So we need to have a digital tax, so we put them in the equal footing with
As
the
the
Malaysian,
locals.
Malaysian
Right.
businesses.
Same time, we need to help the local
Malaysian
SMEs,
So,
especially.
What I'm getting is that both of you are very positive on this. You know, if it were to happen. So, what are your
Vital.
expectation tomorrow? Do you think this will be rolled out at the budget?
Yeah.
I mean, word on the street that it would. But what about your expectation?
Personally, I hope it will not happen. Not
Okay.
until a couple of more years, until things are more settled.
Okay.
Then we'll talk about the public has to be prepared. Sooner or
Right.
later, the
Okay.
government will implement. But as we look at the foreign providers, we may have to look at it. But at the same time, we may have to look at the other way. Maybe this is the way to attract the foreign providers to come and invest in Malaysia, for example, especially in the logistics area,
Right.
warehousing. You know, talking about some brands, you know, that doing this concurrently,
Right.
and they may use Malaysia as a hub. So all these tax incentive can come into play.
Right. Okay. And what yourself? Do you think it will be rolled out tomorrow?
Well, it really depends. It really depends. If the government has already made a decision to go on the avenue of indirect tax, then
Right.
there is a possibility of it being implemented, rolled out quickly. But that may not be popular among the
Right.
people.
Of course.
Yes.
If they're taking direct tax, then I really hope that enough time is given for implementation and consultation before
Right.
implementation,
Right.
because that could be very tricky and technical.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So, do you? Okay. So let's move on to some issues that are close to people's hearts. Affordable housing. It's been a major item in almost every budget so far. Recent surveys had highlighted that large numbers of unsold houses, yet people who needs home cannot even get a loan to buy one. So how can the budget address this mismatch and find a solution to the housing problems? I know we have a lot of initiatives, but I mean, maybe we can see it from a different perspective now, or this time around for tomorrow. We can start with Doctor.
Okay. I think first we need to define what is affordable house.
Okay.
Okay.
What is the price range it should be. The one, I think the Association of House Developers already quoted is about between 100 to 500,000. Maybe we have to relook at that. And then I think Bank Negara has come up with certain amount, I think it's talking about around 200 to 300,000
Right.
to be the right what you call the right price for affordable house.
200 to 300,000.
200 300,000.
Okay.
But it's also based on location, like Professor.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the problem.
Yes, it's
So
based on location.
and size.
It should be the median 3 times of the annual household income.
Okay.
It should be B40 or M40. That should be the price, that the ceiling price, in fact, to be fair, so that they can afford the house.
Right.
Number one.
Okay.
Number two, the household income of the B40 and M40 is very much under the threat of the higher or increasing living costs. Okay, and then another reason is because of this higher living costs, their disposable income become lesser and lesser by the day. How can they
Right.
afford to buy a house?
Yeah,
Because at the
true.
same time they need the money to
Other
to
commitments,
pay
right?
for their commitments, their needs. You know, and third, more stringent I would say stringent requirement put by the banks. You know, whereby a lot of people cannot apply for housing loan because there's something the bank may have to look. More creative financing, for example,
Okay.
just not only about extending finance period up to 40 years, you know, things like that. Forever you'll be paying, you know.
Yes.
Maybe you have to look at basically link it to investment products,
Right.
which will help to pay off the mortgage on a monthly basis, you know,
Okay.
things like that. You know, more creative way to look at it. And fourth, the house that have been built, regardless of location, they are built because of the profit-centeredness of the developer
Okay.
and how much money they can back, how much money they can get, instead of understanding the needs of the target market or target buyers.
Yes.
So I think those are the 4 factors that contributed to why there's a lot of houses, 22.5 billion worth of houses, and out of that 75% are affordable houses.
Right.
And most are quoted at 500,000 per unit.
500.
500,000.
That's
Not
not very
affordable.
affordable, Professor. That's not at all.
Unless you have like 6 jobs or something, I guess.
Yeah. It's
For
expensive.
for the younger generation, I
Yes.
mean. And following up on that, the Maybank Investment Bank, in their pre-budget report, had proposed the establishment of a special low-cost funding for banks to use. Low-cost fund for banks to use help finance first-time home buyers, especially in the B40 group. What are your thoughts on that, Professor? Is it feasible?
I think it's a great initiative.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
a great initiative. Number one, because this B40, they have different profiles.
Okay.
They may not be able to have the same profiles of the existing customer that apply the loan from the normal banks. You know,
Alright.
things like they may be a petty cash trader,
Right.
pasar malam.
Yes.
You know, they have no bank accounts. They survive on basically cash flow basis.
Yes.
So this kind of profiles, like a microcredit, but it's for the house,
Right.
need to be looked into.
Okay.
The structure must be flexible enough, and they need to be treated differently from the normal, say, M40 and above. Secondly, I may suggest is that we can look at cheaper funding. The cheaper funding, because the cost of funding, if you take normal banking funding, is very expensive.
Yes.
It's more expensive, the cost of fund, BLR and so on. Look at for low cost of funding either through a government government subsidy, or it can be GLCs contributing,
Right.
or even combined with the Baitul Mal, for example, to come out with a low cost of fundings, so that you help this group to achieve their dreams, to own a house. And the third area they can look at is basically to look at the exemption on stamp duties,
Okay.
lower legal fees.
Yes,
on
stamp
the
duties and
agreements.
legal fees are
Yes,
expensive.
Expensive. So there's special area, but this can be for the first-time buyers
Yeah.
and the B40 group.
Right.
Right.
So these are the initiative. I think this is good. This is fantastic.
It's like something like you were saying just now, creative
Creative
funding,
financing.
creative
Right.
loans.
That's right.
Okay. And Dinesh, what do you think about this whole housing and affordability and loans?
Yeah.
Okay, tax does have a role to play as
Right.
well.
Okay.
So
Yes,
just now
definitely.
when we started off with GST as an
Right.
example, we spoke about 44 billion under GST and 20 over billion under SST.
Right.
So one of the main reasons for the difference, I wouldn't say the main, but one of the key reasons for the difference would be the construction sector.
Okay.
Right.
About 1/3 of the GST registrants during the GST era come from construction and property sector. Now they're entirely out of the system.
Okay.
Okay.
So then the question arises: if I don't charge service tax in the construction service, shouldn't the price of house be cheaper?
Right.
Now then, if you recollect and take the newspapers back in 2014, 2015, you would see a lot of developers making noise. Oh, the sale of house is not subject to GST. But to sell a house first, you have to make it. The construction cost is subject to GST, so there's an embedded GST, and all these things were well debated. If Prof remembers, in 2014, 2015. Now in 2018, I didn't see any property developer coming forward and saying, "Yay!" So this is one part my clients don't like me saying as well.
Interesting.
So when we do impact study, we realize that if we look at tax in isolation. The abolishment of GST should have an effect of reducing the price of the price of house.
Okay.
Not as much as 6%. Not as much as 6%. Should be lower than that.
Okay.
Because when you buy a house, that's that's the price of the land plus the construction cost plus the developer's profit.
Right.
Previously, what was subject to GST was the construction cost.
Okay.
Which is one of the three main components there.
Okay.
So there should have been some reduction in the housing price.
Exactly.
But of
we
course,
haven't seen that.
the developers, of course, I think this was an ongoing debate in the mainstream media as well.
Okay.
The developers say that now the developers say that wait a minute, tax is just one of the many factors and a small factor taken into account. And yesterday the FM has said that he's expecting a 10% reduction, and for existing SPAs. The FM has reportedly said, wait for tomorrow, wait for the budget.
Right.
Okay.
So
a lot of wait and see approach right now. We're seeing it.
yeah, but I think that wait is
a long wait.
Is an indicative wait.
Okay.
It looks like there's something promising in the budget tomorrow for those who have signed an SPA in light of the in light of the transition period from GST.
So we can definitely see something positive on the housing and affordability of housing. In the budget tomorrow.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Okay, so bringing it back to tax, there's been a lot of speculation about new taxes being introduced either tomorrow or going forward under this new government. And we talk about the digital tax, which is a very broad one, but the names that are being thrown out there is the soda tax, and potential increases in sin taxes, reintroduction of the inherent tax, and even capital gains tax. Besides the digital tax that we have already been discussed, do you think any of this could potentially be announced tomorrow, Mr. Dinesh?
Okay, that's a very big question because we're talking about basket of so many different things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Soda tax is something totally different. Inheritance is different. Capital gains tax is different. So soda tax, what it does, it says that based on the sugar content of your drinks and food items, the producer have to pay the tax.
Right.
And if the producer pays tax, obviously he's not going to pay from his profit. It will be put into the price and then passed on to the consumer. The idea of soda tax, my understanding, is not so much of revenue collection, but it's more of a social behavioral influencing tool.
Right.
So that the price gets more expensive and people are discouraged to buy.
Right.
There are differing thoughts on this, and there are many academic research done internationally. Some say it's good. We need to address, the medical problems and so on.
Yes.
And some say that, are you trying to say if you are rich and you can afford it, you can take as much sugar as you want, and if you're not? So, there are differing thoughts, but those are more from the social perspective than from a pure tax perspective.
Okay.
Capital gain tax has its pros and cons. It has big revenue spinner, but it could have an immediate, in my view, it could have an immediate damaging effect on the capital market and inbound investments, unlike digital taxes.
Right, okay.
Inheritance tax is something that could be thought about, but inheritance tax is something that's a lot narrower than capital gains tax.
Yeah.
And it's also something that the ultra-rich may be able to work around with in a legitimate way.
Okay.
So you might have seen former U.S. presidents to top billionaires having foundations and trusts internationally.
Yes.
That does have something to do with inheritance tax internationally.
Okay.
So it's not something that that
Right,
cannot be
okay.
totally worked out. So inheritance tax, how much money can we actually make out of it?
Right.
That's a very big question mark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I-
Prof, do you
Yeah, of
have
course,
something to
Professor.
add?
Prof.
Discuss a bit on the inheritance tax. It's
Yeah.
a very good topic. Inheritance tax, the way I look at it, I think we need to relook at I think the Malaysia currently we have zero, we call it inheritance tax, right?
Right.
Zero. So the government may want to it could be reduced but at a certain value, not
Okay.
from zero. Maybe for example from 2 million and above. Okay. But the impact of this is not about the tax, it's about the management of wealth, the management of assets, especially for Muslims in Malaysia. If you quote from Amanah Raya Berhad ARB, there were at least about 60 billion of Muslim assets were locked.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it cannot be disbursed because this is what we must encourage Malaysians to look at the financial planning. And they said, well, we don't need to set up, for example, a living trust or trust while we're still around, because the end of the day, when we pass away, there's no tax. If you transfer now, there's a stamp duties. Correct?
Yes.
So these are the things that look at. But if you look at countries like UK, they have a very high inheritance tax up to 40%. But if you set up say a living trust, you transfer the assets during your lifetime for the benefits of your children, for example, there's no tax. But what you do is basically to manage your assets better,
Yeah.
rather than get locked in your lawsuit, locked into the custodian and probate and whatnot. So these are the area I may like the government to look at and in a more practical way, so that we can unlock all these assets.
All right.
Yeah.
That's
Agree
very-
with Prof on that. That this will influence behaviors and how wealth is planned. But coming back to that, new taxes, right? The topic of new tax came about because of revenue collections,
Right.
and,
That's right.
and we know the petrol is temporary and so on. So as Prof rightly mentioned, behavior will change if inheritance tax is implemented,
Yeah.
and as a result, is there really that much that can be taxed?
That's right.
That's a very big question mark.
Okay.
But it may be good to have it for behavioral reasons,
Yes, right.
so that and so on.
Better management, yeah.
Yeah.
Better management of
Okay.
assets.
Coming back to the issue of revenue, I
Right.
think now the FM has also announced that any new tax will also considered alongside with enforcement of existing taxes.
Okay.
This was a recent announcement by the FM as well,
Yes.
to reduce the compliance gap.
Okay.
Because if you keep having taxes and you don't enforce it, then
Yeah.
then those who pay voluntarily will pay. But how
Right.
about those who don't pay voluntarily? And if there's some money in the economy that's being not taxed and is there, you should go and enforce it.
Okay.
I think the FM has begun to recognize that
Okay.
and made a statement a few weeks ago.
Yes.
So I think the need for new tax is being reassessed alongside with enforcement of existing taxes.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for your input. We're just taking a short break right now. Don't go anywhere. You guys don't go anywhere, okay? Because we're just having a short break where we will check out what the public has to say about the 2019 budget. We'll see. We'll be coming back. So you guys check what the people have to say. Yeah.
Okay, I hope the government changes the minimum rate of the salary for the part-timers and full-timers, because currently our living situation is quite hard, and maybe make the public transport a bit better.
Okay, I hope for the Malaysia budget 2019 is to give more focus on academic, especially for the young generation, and give them platform to make them to expose to the reality and work situation. So it's been like for the young generation, we have to expose ourselves to get into the work life.
I wish that our government will fulfill that what they promises us before the elections.
Budget 29, which I know lah, which I want actually. For all these oldies, they don't have any way to go this and that, So it's much very, if I can say it's better for them, give some, help
I wish that the government will look into the currency foreign exchange. That I believe that a lot of Malaysians feel the pinch already since the change of government, as well as to address the cost of living that is getting really unreasonable. And for young homeowners like me, we would like to have a more affordable housing, definitely.
I'm hoping that the government will give more incentive to the students, and I'm also hoping that the government will reduce the fee for our studies.
I think need to increase a lot of facility and then upgrade all the the beds, repo mattress, everything, because looks like very broke, and then something is not functioning well, like the bed, the thing, the roller, everything. And then of course the linen, everything like kotor, cause need to change lah, and then make the environment more nice, because very dim and then all the medical stuff that we use, the equipments and the material also can upgrade lah.
Yeah, as a fresh graduate, I am looking for more job opportunities. So I really hope Malaysia could provide more job opportunities, and also to increase the minimum income rate for fresh graduates.
So I'm hoping as a fresh graduate that we even though we are new in the working environment, we get a suitable salary for us, not too low, not too high. So that's what I hope to get.
Welcome back to the studio. Welcome back to the studio. Thank you for staying on with us. As you can see, the public is quite hopeful there'll be some goodies for them in this tabling of the budget. But unfortunately, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, the finance minister has been on record multiple times over saying that there will be some sacrifices in this upcoming budget, especially because the current government has inherited a rather large debt from the previous administration. So my question is for both of you, what kind of sacrifices can we expect tomorrow?
Yes. Oh, okay. For me first,
yeah?
I think what we call is, in the first place, is austerity budget. So we have to look at there will be no levy spending, there will be no new subsidies given.
Right.
In fact, some of the subsidies may be cut.
Okay.
For example, if you're talking about soda and the price of sugar is going down,
right?
So it just works opposite way, right? Conversely, so there may be less subsidy like on sugar as well. Just for example. Of course, I would not expect any income tax cuts. There will be more tax on sin tax on cigarette. Price will go up, as well as liquor as well. I think in terms of sacrifice, I think that's about mostly on the tax, and I think lesser subsidies.
And what about BRIM, Professor? Can we expect it to still be continued?
I think it will be, but in a different name.
Okay.
Okay. There will be, because that's what people has been used to for the last few years. I think it will be rebrand. I think because they have seen this, until they have restructured the whole setup, the financial system to be more effective, more, I think, to reach the right target group. Probably, maybe there be some overlapping and whatnot, And then, for example, maybe food coupons in the future and so on. Until then, until they find something, it will still be there.
Right.
It will still be there. However, I would expect there will be some subsidy in terms of transportation, especially in the urban areas. Okay, I would expect, I think the government have been talking about a single card whereby you pay just a fixed amount, you can go for unlimited number of rides per day, something like that. Okay. This will help to them, especially the urban poor, the B40 in the urban areas. Yes. Okay. On the other hand, if the price of oil continue to rise, we will expect maybe next year, because the government has said that until December 2018, the price of petrol will not change at 220. But if still keep going up, I think the government maybe have to relook. Maybe Petronas will have more dividends for the government. It is said that for every $1 increase in oil price, okay, Malaysia will get something like 700 million ringgit. Okay, that is from the MOF. Having said that, when the price of oil went up a few years back, we remember talking about the subsidy, and then, the government was talking about the right mechanism to provide the subsidies to the right group, especially the people in the rural area, the fishermen.
According to pay wages, right?
Yeah,
the targeted one.
Yes. I think that topic will come again next year, because I think there will be hefty subsidies on that. So we may expect to see that. That's part of the austerity budget as well.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, sorry. You touched about the Petronas dividend just now. Right before the break, we talk about revenues, right? And so tax is a form of getting revenue for the government. But what about non-tax revenues, such as Petronas dividends, asset sales, and even 1MDB related recoveries? What impact can we expect from this to the government's coffers?
I think in terms of that, I think government is since they introduced SST 2.0,
right? Yes.
Okay, it's lesser amount that going to collect from GST, and then at the same time the government is priming down all the budgets. All right, they will be looking at these resources that you mentioned just now to fill in between, the budget, the federal budget, so that the government have sufficient amount and try to cut down the deficits.
Right.
Of expected around about 3% or 2.8%. So we expect hopefully if the price it's like double-edged sword. If the price of oil goes up, and then Petronas will make more money and Malaysia will have more money. But on the consumer side, government, the money from Petronas, dividends, government has to use to subsidize the price of palm price. So this is like double-edged. Okay, how much we can get from the assets from 1ADB and so on? It depends on the market, because you're talking about forces value, economy price, things like that.
Exactly.
So it depends on the forces value. You cannot sell, let's say, it's worth 1 billion ringgit. You cannot sell it for 1 billion ringgit. You have to be a forces value, whoever, because these are all customized, luxurious yacht, super yachts, you call it. And other, maybe the government has to look at. Beside that, also have to look at raising funds from selling of assets, non-strategic assets. They may have to liquidate some of the holdings through the fund companies like Khazanah, for example, or sell certain land, to get more money in order for the government to have a sufficient budget. Yeah, and maybe looking at refinancing, issuing medium-term notes. To repay back all the existing debts.
Okay.
So these are some of the measures I can think of.
And Dinesh, would you like to? Yeah. It's okay if you don't want to. It's okay.
So I can only speak on the tax side of things, right?
All right.
On tax side of things, the people just had some good news on the 3 months tax holiday period and the abolishment of GST. Even there's already a controversy of, hey, the government has less money, but the price on the street, has it actually reduced or not? So we are still not fully done with that.
Right.
And they're supposedly supposed to benefit Rakyat with this. So while we're trying to comprehend the impact of that, if a new tax comes in, and if it doesn't affect the man on the street, but it taxes the right gap in the market, for example, I would think a digital tax is a right gap in the market. I'm not a big fan of capital gains tax, because if you chase away the real investors, then it will have a spin-off effect on the economy and employment rate and everything. But taxing a digital tax may not have such impact. So that's okay. But most of the other taxes seems to be either insignificant revenue or affecting the consumers. And the consumers may be psychologically not so ready about it. I'm not too sure. Of course, there has been announcements from the governments to expect new taxes and all. I really hope it's a false alarm.
Right.
Like what I used to do in my student days, right? Since you said I look very young when I walked into the studio, I recollect my student days where I used to come back from exam and always tell my parents that the paper was very tough.
Right.
So that when the result comes out, it's always, hey, good job, man. So now the government has announced that you should expect new tax, prepare for the worst. So hopefully it's not bad, and people rejoice in.
There's a cushion.
That means mere status quo becomes a celebration.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I hope that from a tax perspective, of course, here and there I expect a few things, but by and large, I think to the consumer and to the working class, the impact should be status quo. Otherwise, there's no real benefit of abolishing GST and
Can I add to that?
Yes, of course.
I was I think talking about the price of goods, and then you have the tax, and people are expecting price of goods to come down.
Yes.
Eventually, when we introduce the SST, they have to understand. Or people say it's only 6%. Tax is only 6% of the whole thing of the price of goods. But we have to understand the value change.
Yes.
Okay, the value change of a product is not that simple by just lowering. Is affected by the value chain as well as other factors like cost of raw materials. Is it imported? How about the foreign exchange? You know, things like that. You know, so it's not that simple. If you reduce the tax today, and then tomorrow the price of the goods is going to be cheaper. It's not like that. It's not that simple. We have to understand value chain. We have to understand inventory. We have to understand logistics. You know, the warehousing and whatnot. People, there's a cost to keep goods. You know, and we normally when you want a certain amount economies of scale, you order a lot, and you have this inventory maybe for a few months or even 6 months. You know, these are the things that people should not expect it to go down immediately. I think as our tax expert said just now, if you want to see SST, you have to look at 1 year at least. Correct? So then you should see things normalize.
Right.
Yeah, then it will take some time.
But when we hear your explanation, right, you think that, okay, so the question now is when will it drop, and will it drop? So macam, how is that going to?
It's not immediately. You know, you have to understand the factor of demand and supply.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Demand and supply is not simple. We talk about equilibrium. Okay. When the demand meets supply, we understand the price. Okay. This is the price when demand and supply. At the same time, we cannot expect something to go down immediately. We have a lot of factors. That's why the more open the economy, and the more people can import foods or any other items into the country, the more transparent the whole value chain is going to be. So from there we can see the price. It will take some time because the system, everything will take at least fastest is 6 months. Okay, ideally maybe 1 year, or even 2 years. It depends, but it depends also exchange rate, and the rate of US dollars going up. Right now, you wouldn't know. You have to hedge your position if you are importers.
Right.
You know, you have to lock in your exchange rate rather than just let it be on a periodical basis, on the spot basis.
Okay. All right. So, I'm going to another topic now, the Tabung Harapan Rakyat, which is right now at about 200 million ringgit since it was first created to help the country's debt levels. So, how do you think the Pakatan Harapan government should utilize the funds today? I mean, tomorrow, since they're announcing the budget, we're pretty sure that they're going to be addressing it because they'll be closing the Tabung altogether on the 31st of December.
Good question.
Maybe I will add on to that.
Okay.
Let's understand the concept here. Whatever money that the federal government receives must goes through the federal consolidated fund.
Okay.
It cannot escape the federal consolidated fund.
Okay.
That would be like illegal, So Tabung Harapan also goes through the federal consolidated fund, just like any taxes and so on. So then the government has a choice whether to put it to the pool of money that they already have, or to give a specific allocation for it. That's the choice that they have, and we'll have to look at the budget tomorrow, whether the Tabung Harapan will be used for a specific purpose or would be lump summed with the general revenue of the government.
Okay, all right. And what about you, Prof?
Well, I think the government will go with the what is popular.
Okay, of course.
Okay.
But I was listening to the radio, they were discussing about this, and they were talking about schools, facilities, and hospitals, but then we're also talking about like what we can see immediate, or like should we actually pay the debt, the reason why the money was collected in the first place. So should it be for the people, or should it be for the debt?
The debt.
It should be for both, in my opinion. It should be both.
Okay.
And it partly because the people contribute, and then the amount of money should go also to the immediate needs. Some, like schools, some of schools, especially in Sarawak, for example, just quoted from the newspaper, quite in dilapidated conditions.
Yes.
You need immediate funds, for this. So these can be used, and partly can be used because we're not. In fact, about the debt. Maybe there's some early debt that we can retire. We can use the money for that because that is actually the main objective when it was established. But at the same time, it's for the good of people as well.
Right.
So as I said, maybe maybe I don't know whether it's 50% or 50 here, 50 there. But it's good that we have that because this is giving back to the rightfully who needs it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And okay, before we end, finally, maybe we could have. This was very comprehensive, very comprehensive, and I'm sure people will be more prepared as we listen tomorrow. Is there anything else that is very important to you guys or to the people in general that we have not touched on? Maybe you guys could talk about it more. Maybe we could start with Dinesh, Prof.
I think we should be expecting the best, but at the same time prepared for the worst.
All right.
Okay.
It's like, I don't know, Linda, you have tried cooking?
Yes.
For the first time you try a dish, does it always come out?
Never.
I hope it's not a never for tomorrow, but it's the first budget for the new government. It's a team of mostly new people, and the situation is also a bit sophisticated at the moment with debts and exchange rates and so on. So I would say we should expect the best, but prepare for the worst.
Okay.
Wow.
I'll be more specific. I'll be talking about SMEs, small medium enterprise on that. I think I'll be looking forward in the budget that government allocated a big amount for the SMEs to grow the SMEs, better incentive for the SMEs, and so that they can capture at least the digital economy.
All right.
So this will help because why I'm talking about SMEs? Because in contribution of SMEs to the Malaysian economy is about 37%, and the government is looking at to reach about 41% by 2020. And the other thing is, the SMEs provide about 65% of the employment in Malaysia.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So that's another way to look at the employment factor. And in terms of business, SME makes up about 98.5% for the country's business. So we have to really build the SMEs as the engine of growth. So we expect for this budget, since government is doing the trimming measure to restructure itself, the catalyst of the growth for the economy will be the private sector. Okay, and for the private sector to thrive, there must be an ecosystem which is more transparent, open, flexible, that will help all these, especially the SMEs, to move up and grow. So that's what I'm looking in particularly area.
From the budget tomorrow.
From the budget tomorrow for the SMEs. All right.
Oh, I think we got everything that we need, and we have run out of time. Thank you so much to both of you for your time and your expertise, and thank you so much for the audience back home who are watching right now. We would like to remind that we will have a live telecast of the budget tomorrow at around 3 p.m. and a discussion to follow afterwards. Please do tune in. I'm Lydiana Rosli.
I am Tasnim Lokman, and thank you so much for watching us. See you guys tomorrow.